everyone. Thanks for joining me. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. For those of you who follow on this channel every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific, you know that the reason I started the Plant-Based Business Hour is because if we're going to have a safe and secure future, we need a safe and secure food supply. And that's plant-based foods. And it can't just be impossible, and it can't just be beyond. If we're going to feed the world, there's obviously going to have to be a lot more companies than that. So I wanted to make these companies aware to the consumers who are interested in them and the investors, so that both these parties, consumers and investors, can find these other small but soon to be large plant-based companies as we move towards shifting our food supply to a plant-based food supply system. So without further ado, I want to bring on someone today who is one of the top 3 most active investors, along with his company, Unovis Asset Managers and New Crop Capital. Chris Kerr is here to talk to us all about investing. Chris, thanks for being with me.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you here. So you are prolific, my friend. You do invest in a lot of companies. I just want to show people a couple JPEGs right here. So some of the companies, Good Catch, Good Dot, whom I've interviewed on this show, Miyoko's, who's been on the show, Beyond Meat's been on the show, Alpha Foods. Here's another shot. Some of the things you've exited, Purple Carrot, you've exited, New Wave, Outstanding Foods is going to be on this show next week. You've had an incredible track record. Tell me, are you just a genius, or is it some luck in there?
Oh, it's mostly luck and mostly just hunger. We make small bets in innovative companies and see where they go. And sometimes it's just changing the narrative. Sometimes it's starting the conversation. Sometimes it's just backing the ones that are on the right track. And I'm not a genius, that's for sure. Just a hungry vegan.
Oh, I love it. So you are vegan. I wanted to make sure that if that's how you roll.
That's how I roll. I've been vegan since April 2nd, 2002. And I became vegan because some people are born with the sense of right and wrong. I was not. I had to learn it. And so in my 30s, I met my now wife, Kirsty Golson, who is, by all definitions, Snow White. And she's just been incredibly influential in how I perceive the world. And she's the one who put me on the right track. I think that's the fair way of putting it.
I love that. So you had some outside influence that brought you to a vegan path, and then you decided to put your dollars where your ethics are. Is that right?
Yeah, it was really 2-part. Kirsty's the one who got me to take the veils off my eyes, question everything. And when you start questioning food, it's very, very base, right? It's very basic. And you realize that you've been manipulated on a bunch of different levels. So you start questioning all sorts of things, the entire spectrum of humanity, to be quite frank. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. And when we decided to shift our focus from all investments to, let's say, plant-based investing, putting that focus brought great clarity to me. So I actually partnered up with Tal Ronan. He's the one who introduced me to everybody I know today. And then today I pass that love along and I try to introduce everybody I can to everybody in the space. We built a coalition. It's taken 13 years now, but it's been a remarkable ride.
And for those of you who don't know, Tal Ronan is one of the chefs behind Crossroads. He is the chef really behind Crossroads, which is a restaurant in Los Angeles, which is kind of a focal point for many of the LA vegans here, where they started, where they got their chops. There isn't one thing on that menu that is not, gosh darn delicious and life affirming. I think that's a very important part of that menu. It is life affirming. And it sounds like this has been a life affirming journey for you. I'll just say from my own perspective, when I aligned my purchasing power with my ethics, I felt like I was 120% of myself. I felt so aligned, and that alignment gave me so much more efficiency and so much more energy. And I hadn't realized that in being unaligned, when I was using my dollars that didn't align with my values, I was really holding myself back. So for the business folks watching today, there's a lot of efficiency in aligning those dollars with how you see the world.
Yeah. And what's very nice is it's a community. Doors were open for me. Tal opened doors. I opened doors for others. It's a big tent. Venture capital is generally very competitive. And so it's about who gets the best deal. In our world, it's about who can we bring into our best deals. That mind shift is how I like to work. I'm a collaboration guy. I love being around friends. And I like to work with people. I play the long game. And, what I'm looking for is a life of happiness, doing what I want to do with people I want to do it with. And Tall really set the tone for me, because when I started meeting other entrepreneurs in this space, real leaders, Seth Tibbett from Tofurkey and the founders of Veganays, and we ended up working with the Dea team to get them started. These are people that really come from the right place. It's a remarkable place to work when you have those types of minds around you, where everybody's trying to make the world a little bit better. It's wonderful.
And Seth has been on this show, and I love what he says. The superpower of vegans is that they all share this mission. So in addition to having a great product, they really have this powerful belief, and it makes them so much stronger than their competitors, because they'll really stop at nothing to see this mission fulfilled, which is so beautiful. So I love that you're saying you really combine your sense of seeing the world with your dollars. But let's talk a little bit about those dollars, because I know that you have so much to teach people about investing, and also who you choose to invest in and why. So one of the things that I see a lot, I'm starting to dip my toe in very slowly into investing. And when I look at pitch decks and other things like that, I see that people are very focused on the product. And of course, there's no getting around it, right? It has to be taste first, taste. But then the rest seems to go out the window. So I find myself saying, but where are the numbers? So maybe you could give some entrepreneurs some tips about moving beyond the product.
Well, what's important is that most companies don't come out with their best product right out of the gate. I mean, even the Apple iPhone isn't what it was when it first came out. There's a migration there. Beyond Meat Star is a chicken company, but what made it a worldwide, hero is the burger. How these companies come to market is not the end of the story, it's the beginning. And so ultimately what we like to focus on is what's the team, what's their innovation plan, what's their market entry point, and then ultimately, how do you buy time? Time creates opportunity. And the longer you have, the longer runway you have to find your spot, the more likely you're going to find success. I think the best scenario, the best story I can tell about that is Whitewave. Whitewave was around for 20 years before it came up with the idea of silk. It was another 10 years before silk was really nationally known, and another 10 years after that before it became globally known. So it's a 40-year process, but it had been around for 20 years prior to that. Even field roast had been around for a decade before it came out with its sausage, right? So mostly, sometimes you're ahead of the curve. The market's not ready for you. Right now, the market is ahead of the curve. The market is asking for more. And we're trying very hard to fuel the innovation that will satisfy that demand, which is, let's be honest, the demand is very simple. I want something good to eat, right? That's what they're trying to solve. They're not trying to say, do I buy a Tesla? Am I going to put solar panels on my roof? They're saying, can I get a grilled cheese sandwich that melts, that tastes great? Can I get tuna that doesn't include tuna fish? And so what we're trying to solve is a short-term need with a big philosophical statement. And ultimately, what I ask entrepreneurs to do is to come back to the ground on this. What is it that you're really trying to solve? Does it solve it? If not, when will it solve it? And who are you solving this for? And ultimately, if you have those in line, you've got a great business opportunity. It does not make it investable, I might add. There's plenty of ways of taking a great company and making it impossible to invest in it, because some deals are just not good deals. They could be overpriced. They could be just structured wrong. So we have lots of companies that we love that they should stay lifestyle companies. They shouldn't take on venture capital. My mantra is it's easier to divorce your spouse than to get rid of an investment partner. So choose them really, really wisely. That's true. The methods of separating from an investor are complicated and messy. And so really, really think about that funding process. Why do you need the money? What's it going to get you to? And what problem are you solving? And ultimately, in our world, it better be hunger. You better be solving something that is really satisfying, because that makes it fun.
But even that, I think, is tricky. When I look at things like ice cream, which does solve can, if the product is good, it can solve the taste issue. And of course, you also want to solve convenience and price. That's got to come down the line at some point. We all know this from the Good Food Institute. Thank you, Good Food Institute. So you got to hit those three. But of course, you're starting with taste first. But something like ice cream, I always worry when I see investments for new ice cream products. Well, that's just going to be a market that the big players come in and take over. And maybe because there's not enough IP there, they don't even buy you out. They just nudge you out. So I don't know if that ever plays a part in your decision making.
Well, in our case, it does. Every business, you want to know, are you solving a problem? What's your unique value proposition? And so if you're just another ice cream, we're probably not going to do it. Particularly for new crop, we're mission focused. Our money goes to charity. So ultimately, what did we change? What did we shift? Another decadence probably isn't going to be something that will make our world better. In our case, there's a lot of good companies out there that are coming up with that, but it doesn't solve the bigger equations for us. That being said, it doesn't mean that those aren't great enterprises. It just might mean that they're not wonderfully investable. And so we're a little more picky around that.
And so when you're looking at things to invest in, you say you're trying to solve this world problem as well as get people a great product. Are you looking, because the JPEG that I threw up before, let's see if I can find this for folks again. These are all pretty much consumer packaged goods, give or take, pretty much here. So I'm wondering if you are looking at technology that fuels some of this, like, sorry, let me get back to your face here. There's too many buttons for me. I apologize.
This is a better looking slide anyway.
It's not true. It's not true. No. Oh, I'm so sorry.
So I'll tell you that, so you're looking at a bunch of icons, right? Most food ends up being consumer packaged in some way or another. It's a CPG product. But we don't really invest in CPG. CPG is generally, as we define it in the kind of traditional sense, it's one where, so in the taste, price, and convenience, there's a fourth leg to that, and it's awareness. So we call it the food pact. Price, awareness, convenience, and taste. Awareness is critical. That's marketing. Now, if your biggest play, your biggest advantage is marketing, that's very expensive. And that might be another ice cream, right? So you're trying to build awareness about this particular ice cream in a very crowded space. It's easier to build awareness around something that's unique that nobody else has. And so we focus on taste first, then build awareness around that, get excitement. Then we worry about price, which is production, then convenience is distribution, right? You have to have all of those things. They all have to grow. At one point or another, it's circular, right? But awareness, price, and convenience all have to grow at the same time. Taste has to be perpetually innovating. Otherwise, you're going to be a 40-year-old product that doesn't get any better. We focus on the awareness part, and that's the difference between what we will choose, which is CPG. Like we won't do beverages because beverages is just too crowded. It's also very easy to scale, and which means it's really a question about, well, are you getting market share? In our world, we want to know, are we replacing something? It's share of stomach is what we look for. And so are we taking our plant-based proteins and putting them where an animal otherwise would be? That's our goal. That's our mission. That's our charge. So we don't want to replace one plant-based burger with another plant-based burger. We want to go after the mass market. So CPG is about the awareness. The icons that you showed are about awareness, but underneath all of those, there has to be some IP. It may be something that's formulaic. It may be practical or mechanical, whatever that may be. But sometimes it's just about first mover. I mean, sometimes it's just about being the first one to the market, and your IP could literally be that icon if that's what it is. It's consumers knowing who you are. Sometimes that's your advantage. A lot of what we do is not high tech. It may be dressed up as a food tech company, but at the end of the day, it's a recipe. And then the question is, well, how are you producing it, and can you do it at scale?
Well, it's interesting that you note, as many investors do, I think, that there has to be some IP somewhere for you. That's why I was wondering if you did see yourself getting into technologies that are changing the way food is made, like 3D printers, which might make it much more accessible for people. I don't know. Do you look at any kind of technologies like that?
So we do. So we were one of the earliest investors in cellular agriculture, and maybe the way of putting this is most simple is we're not really going to invest too much more in science, but we will invest in engineering, right? And so if the science is discovered, and now it's just a question of scaling or a question of inputs, 80% of cost of goods sold for cell ag, for cultured meat, is still going to be what are you feeding the cells, right? And so there's no efficiency there yet. So you got to feed those cells. So it's really, I like to compare it to farming as we know it today. You can be in the beef business by being McDonald's selling a burger, by being Cargill processing the beef, by being somebody else raising the cows. You could be ADM feeding the cows. You could be John Deere plowing the fields. All of those fall into that spectrum. We're very similar in that we still have scaling issues. What are we feeding the cells? How are we turning that into food? And then how are we getting it to consumers? So we're going to start investing less in the science and discovery side, more in the engineering side, because that's how we're going to change. That's how we're going to change humanity. That's how we change what people eat.
Okay, so let me just recap that because I want to make sure that I got it. You're saying that in the cellular agriculture world, you're still feeding those cells some kind of animal-based product?
No. It's called growth factors, and it's all sorts of things. It's a whole cocktail. It's amino acids and all sorts of stuff. Way out of my league. I wouldn't even know what I'm talking about. I know to call them growth factors. That's all I got for you. You can call it media. It's the same thing that you would feed anything that you want to grow in a petri dish, right? To one degree or another. So you're giving these cells something to thrive on. And so there's nothing novel about that. We've been doing that for probably generations. The question is, how do you then scale that? So we'll invest in the scaling side of it.
Yes, I see. Okay. And that always is the dilemma for small businesses, is taking that to scale. Beyond Meat has done such a great job of that. Beyond Meat also has done a great job at what you were saying before, constantly reinventing yourself. So a product that grows and is better as Beyond Meat goes to 2.0, and I think even a 3.0 now. So I see exactly where you're going with that. And that is one of the market advantages to meat and dairy, which is not going anywhere. There's really there's nothing to do there. It is meat and dairy, and that's that. Whereas a plant-based burger, sausage, link, bacon, et cetera, is going to get better and get better and get more efficient as time goes on and as more consumers switch over and as scale is there. So I wonder if you can counsel entrepreneurs on how they value their companies. So one of the things I'm guessing that you look at when you look at a deck, although I often find decks don't even have this number, which again leaves me like in the corner saying, but where are the numbers? Where are the numbers? How do you counsel people on how to value their company?
I start by saying that 100% of the time, the value is wrong. And there's a difference between valuation and value. Value is what you will sell your company for. The same way you can say my house is worth $1 million, but if somebody's only going to spend $200,000 on it, your house is worth $200,000. So there's valuation, and then there's value, and you really don't want to confuse those two things because they're not really even relevant. If somebody tells you today they just raised capital at a $100 million valuation, that does not tell you what that company is worth. It's just a metrics that's used to tell you how many shares they got for what they invested in. But there's a whole pecking order to that. And so ultimately what we ask entrepreneurs is, what are you trying to make efficient? Do you want the least amount of dilution? Are you looking for the notoriety of a high valuation? Because we can do lots of things to engineer that. There's things like liquidation preferences. If somebody says, I want my company to be worth $1 billion in valuation, I can say, great, I'm going to put a 3x liquidation preference on my investment. And if you're right, you'll get your valuation. But if I think you're worth less, I'm going to get 3 times my money back before you see $1. So we can deal with that in the terms side of it. So there's the price and then there's terms. I might add, when you sell a house, it's the same thing. You sell anything. You either buy it on price, you buy it on terms. And in this world, that's the art of the deal, is figuring out what's the best way to find efficiency there. We pull those levers based on what the entrepreneur is looking for. And within that, we'll find a way of protecting ourselves and also making sure that the entrepreneurs have skin in the game over the long haul. We really want entrepreneurs to be vested in the success of the company. But if they feel like they've been washed out because they've been diluted, or they feel like their stocks are worth nothing because the valuation was too high, we've lost. we've all lost, not just them, we've all lost. And so ultimately we want these things to play out in a very friendly environment. It's when they don't. It's when there's a market collapse. It's when the capital markets dry up. It's when they fail in a launch that you have to have that meet your maker conversation. It's a tough one to have, but it's the right one to have. And what I try to counsel people on is be open to the stage of your company. Be open to the role that you play in it today. Very few people can found a company and also take it public. I happen to be a guy that specializes in 0 to 5 million in revenues. And at 5 million, if I'm still hanging around, you got the wrong guy. I don't have expertise there. But I'm really good at 0. And I do well right up until maybe $1 million. And then, quite frankly, time to hire somebody else. And I really like that. You can hire a CFO or a marketing person or a salesperson who's really good at getting a company started, but they might not be the same person you want to go sell into China for you. And so understanding your role in the evolution of a company is really critical. And I try to counsel people early on really what is the path that you're trying to go down. I might add, we had right up until 2 months ago, a generation of entrepreneurs that had never seen an economic downturn. This is my 4th one. We need to know how to right-size businesses quickly. We need to know how to make them sustain through tough times. Not every entrepreneur does that when they've been feeding off venture capital funds. And so it's critical to figure out, and this gets back to the valuation, why it is you're looking for certain valuations and what does that get you and what happens when things go wrong. And what we try to do, I hate to say it, it's like a prenup. You want to know what happens when things don't go perfectly, because odds are that they won't. And right now we're going to see that. We're going to see that. For whatever reason, by the way, this pandemic has been remarkable for plant-based food.
Absolutely.
I am, when it first hit, my wife and I were on our way to the Natural Products Expo, in which they canceled. And I just thought, man, we're just about to open our Good Catch plant. We've got all these companies that are, really in this sweet spot of launch. How is this going to play out? And we had to run on our products, and we have more demand and more. I mean, it's a remarkable outcome. And it says a lot about what we can do to change the world.
Yeah. So it's remarkable in so many ways for the meat eaters out there who are starting to make the connection that meat-borne pandemics come from meat. So there's that, and that they maybe don't think meat is as safe for them as they once thought before. Perhaps they're seeing how workers are treated. Perhaps they're seeing that workers are infected and still handling their food products, and then they're refrigerated to go directly to them so that food remains contaminated in a perfect situation. But even beyond the coronaviruses of the world, there's just the general heart disease and diabetes and obesity. And so for many reasons, people are starting to make that connection. And this pandemic, which I think is one of the great if you can say that there's a highlight to it, is that the relationships that are developing between the store buyers and the products. So these supply chains are being solidified, or distribution chains are being solidified, and these relationships are being made. So it's not just a coronavirus bump that we're going to see. I think we're going to see it here to stay. And just to recap what you were saying, I love how you're saying that when you get involved as an investor, you really want to do more, it seems, than just give your money. It seems that you really want to be an active player in building that business. Is that correct?
We set the foundation. And so we set the foundation, and quite frankly, we bring around consider us the concrete company, right? We come in and we make sure that there's something stable there that can be built on. Now from that, we can bring in all different architects and builders to figure out what to do above that. And, but if you have a rocky foundation, it doesn't really matter what's on top. And so ultimately what we try to do is come in and help set the tone for what the next couple of years are going to look like. And ultimately what we try to do is figure out what does the funding plan look like through about 3 funding rounds. And usually by the third, we are out. We don't really want to be influential, at least not too much. What we try to do, the greatest risk for a seed investor is funding a bridge to nowhere. And so most importantly, and this goes to our collaboration, one of the very first phone calls, I think it was literally the first phone call I made when I was asked to run New Crop Capital. I called Chuck Lau over at Stray Dog. I said, Chuck, I got a little bit of money to work with. You got a little bit of money to work with. We're trying to change a $1 trillion, animal business here. we're going to need to join up. And he said, yeah, we're going to have to do it with more than just us. So that was the beginning of the Glasswall Syndicate. And Lisa ForA really, took the lead on that. She's been remarkable at helping to build that. But we try to bring around a coalition of investors who will help see these companies through multiple stages. And at some point, you're going to have to pull on people with talent that understand distribution. These are companies that, by the way, some have been around for 150 years. Some have been around 60 years. At the low end, you're looking at about 60 years for these big companies. And we're just getting started here. So to think that we can do this without them is a false narrative. We have to use them. The question is, will they see the world the way that we do? They didn't for a long time. They do now. They do now. And that shift happened. It started in 2016, and it's just getting better and better. Better and better.
So let's get into that. When you say work with them, you're talking about meat and dairy. You're talking about the people with the deep distribution channels and the deep pockets. And you're talking about working with meat and dairy that has not been with us for 100 years, give or take. But you're seeing that turn now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. You're seeing JBS get involved, Tyson with Tyson Ventures, Cargill, and more than just those three, of course. But they seem to still be hedging their bets. Now, I don't want to say that this is a small amount of money for Cargill to be about 7% invested in plant-based. It is significant. But when I see blended products that are coming from Purdue, let's say, or even Tyson with Raised and Rooted, where it's half meat, half plant-based, I wonder sometimes if they're all in, although they have to be looking at the dollars and the resources and doing the mathematical equation and seeing that it's a better business deal for them to be in plant-based.
Well, I'll tell you, I can't read into the strategy of multinational corporations. I will say that the bullseye is where we are. We're the bullseye. If you can make really good products that don't have to have meat in it, the question is, did you satisfy that very short-term need, right? And so, again, you don't have to get overly philosophical about it. Did I have to put egg into something when it really didn't add much in the way of value to that product, to that experience? I think that they're missing the mark. I will say, anecdotally, our little fund gets invited to speak in some of the largest multinational corporations on the planet, names everybody knows, to help them figure out what the heck to do with this market. Because we're good at it. We actually understand it. To watch companies flail or even fail or do something that is mediocre is unfortunate, because they can do better than that. They have the resources to do better.
Yes.
We've lived in a world of mediocrity for a long time. It's been hard to transition away from, my ongoing joke is, what did I eat for the first 5 years of being vegan? Mostly disappointment, and it was sprinkled on everything. That world is gone now. It's gone. Like I have so many great things to eat at night. I want for nothing. Yeah. So the idea that somehow I have to throw an egg on something in order to make it satisfying just isn't true. It's flat out not true anymore. So the question is, what do we do to help these companies help themselves? And in doing so, you hit the center of the bullseye. And at the center of the bullseye is a big tent. I think it was the Prius. I think it was the Prius that whoever designed the Prius, they made it vegan right out of the gate. And they said vegan is the center of the bullseye. That everybody can eat vegan, right? Everybody can buy into that. So if you have a philosophy as far as why you're trying to buy an electric car, why not include everybody? And that was it. And I think it works. And I think Tesla's done the same thing. So we try to do the same thing. Play the long game. Focus on the end goal, try not to cut corners. And what I'm trying to do, and what my team is trying to do, and what our coalition is trying to do, is to bring in a massive toolbox. So if somebody says, yeah, I love croissant, I want more croissant, how do I get my egg out of my croissant or my butter out of croissant? We can say, here you go. Here's ForA, or here's zero egg, or here's whatever else you want to put in it, as long as it's vegan. So we've created this menu. I think when I first started New Crop, the idea was, let's just focus on, center of the target, which was eggs and chicken. And my thesis was, if you want to create long-term sustained behavioral change, you need a delicious menu to choose from.
Yes.
So it can't just be chicken every day. Nobody's going to eat a Beyond Burger every day. I eat one once a week, and it's fantastic. I had one last night, but I don't want to eat it every day. I don't think. Maybe I do. I give it a try. But so ultimately, we want to push these corporations, give them the tools that we see coming. The good news is they're asking for it. The bad news is they're not scaled yet. So you can't just go into a Tesco or somebody big like that unless you've got the resources.
Right. So that is one of the frustrating hurdles for plant-based foods is they're not scaled actually to the demand of these large multinationals, let alone the consumer demand. So scaling is really where there's this, I don't want to say disconnect, but there's just not enough contract manufacturers out there for all the food that we need to make really rapidly. I mean, the shift from, I don't need to tell you, Chris, of meat and dairy over to plant-based interest is happening at lightning speed. I mean, some of us would say, well, we've been waiting for it forever, but now it's taking place at lightning speed. Yeah. And so to scale up is really the trick among tricks. It's great to see that these multinationals are interested in replacing out. And ultimately, I believe this is going to make them more efficient and save them more dollars. So why wouldn't they want to? In addition, it saves them resources because we're going from 7 billion people to 10 billion people, but we're not getting more land. And we're not getting more water. So, you kind of do that basic math and you see that you need to shift your supplies. I get asked that a lot as well by small businesses and corporations. Like, I want to change. What do I do? And I'm so ready. I love ForA, by the way. I love those guys. But they're not the only ones who make B2B products so that you can get out the butter, get out the eggs, et cetera.
Yeah. So I will tell you that the corporations can scale it. They know how. I mean, look at what's happening right now with General Motors making ventilators. They don't make ventilators, but they know how to make ventilators. What has shifted is that if you think about plant-based meat production as an example, there's one piece of it, which is, let's say, an extruder or something like that actually makes the protein. But after that, the back half of that is freezing equipment. It's called IQF, very, very expensive. You've got packaging equipment, you've got logistics, boxing, just something that puts things into a carton can cost $250,000. That already exists. And those cartons and those formers, they don't care what that protein is. So if we can put at the front line, the protein production, those meat companies can do all of the rest with what they have today. Most importantly, they have wheels on the ground going right into the shops where the consumers are. And ultimately, if it's not convenient, it's irrelevant. It has to be convenient. It has to be in front of you. I use this analogy. I would love to eat nothing but seedless watermelon every single day. But if I'm on an airplane flying over the Atlantic and the only thing that comes down the cart is Pringles, I'm going to end up eating Pringles. Mm-hmm. So my aspiration and what I actually do, there's a big chasm between those two. And so that convenience factor is really, really critical. And that's the one that we've really engaged the multinationals, not even multinationals, the I would say regional strategics, the Maple Leafs of the world and Greenleaf. You got Val companies in Spain, PHW in Germany. Those are companies that have wheels on the ground that can make these convenient. And ultimately, we want to plug into their infrastructure that took 60 years to build. That was Dean Foods and Silk Soy Milk, by the way. Liquid scales very quickly. So beverages will do very well. And if the world thinks that plant-based meat will grow as fast as plant-based dairy, it won't, because the infrastructure won't support it. However, 90% of the infrastructure will. If we can produce the proteins, the rest falls into place. And so right now we're trying to solve that protein production side of it.
And what's it going to take to do that?
Equipment and engineering. So right now, most of the meat companies actually have space in their production facilities to put another piece of equipment. They've got all the downline equipment. They need to know how to use the equipment. There's only probably 50 people on the planet that really know how to make plant-based meat well. So we need those people. We have a bunch of them, thank God, who we want to keep in our tent, I might add. But we can, teach a man to fish, so to speak. Sebastiano is a remarkable man, by the way.
Ciao, Sebastiano.
So ultimately, we want to engage them. This is a good example. We had one company. It's a big meat company, regional meat company in Europe, and they said, we can manufacture and we can distribute. We can't market and we can't create. They didn't have any R&D because they don't need it. It's meat. You don't have R&D in meat.
Right.
They didn't have marketing because it was a commodity. Why do you need marketing if your product is really just like everybody else? What they had was very efficient distribution and production capacity. So for them to be able to enter this space with very small amount of dollars allows them to serve a constituency that they will otherwise miss out on.
I hope when you are talking about the top 50 in the world who know how to make plant-based meat, I hope that Christy Lagali figures into that conversation, because she has been wonderful at addressing this exact issue with regards to chicken and scaling up such that you can make the large quantities of plant-based chicken that you want to make at the price you want to make it. And she's an engineer who comes to it not just with a great product, but with the further idea of then how do you scale it, which is really the problem that we're talking about. I want to say from my perspective, one of the exciting things, and it's a hard pill to swallow in the beginning. Do we work with meat and dairy? Quickly, you realize you have to, and that's that. What comes with these deep distribution channels is these deep advertising pockets. And so they can say, oh, it's manly to eat plants. And from one day to the next, you see the culture saying, oh, okay, I guess meat is out and plants are in, and that's what's manly. And I'm waiting for those advertising campaigns to take hold.
Well, it's interesting. Corporations are mandated to take $1 if it's being offered, right? And so a great example, Tesco. I walked into Tesco with Derek Sarno, I guess it's coming up on 2 or 3 years now. And we walked into one of the biggest stores they had and said, we're going to walk out with something that a vegan can eat. And we walked through this store, all through it. Now, of course, we could have eaten vegetables and that kind of stuff, but we wanted, something that we could say, yeah, I could go and eat this in front of my friends and not be criticized. One product in the entire store. We had the lowly.
What year is this?
2 years ago, three years ago now. And the lowly hummus wrap was the only thing that we could eat. So Derek went in there and he built a line of grab and go vegan products called Wicked Kitchen, and it's massively successful. But more importantly, so Tesco, I think one of their claims was, well, our customers aren't asking for these products. And I said, you don't have these, the customers here, they're walking right past your store and they're walking into Pret a Manger. So if you can get them into your store, they'll buy other stuff, but you need to invite them in the first place. And when they launched that, oh my God, it was just massively successful. It really changed the dynamic of Tesco. It changed the perception of Tesco in all of the United Kingdom, and it changed all of the United Kingdom's perception of vegan. That happened in about 6 months. It was a sea change. We need more of that, and the way I focus on that is that chefs create a culinary experience that consumers will appreciate. If you give consumers a whole bunch of ingredients and say, good luck with this, not that many people know what to do with it. But if you say, by the way, here's a wrap, don't worry about what's in it. It's just delicious. It happens to be vegan. By the way, you can have Oreos or whatever they are, and it can be a delicious Fritos. Fritos are one of the most delicious vegan experiences they are. Sometimes there are things accidentally vegan. It's still a good experience. And so what we wanted to do is say, let's take away the philosophical conversation, and let's make this about the experience, and let's make sure that chefs are the ones setting that stage. And so Derek Sarno and Chad Sarno, they're the ones who really did that. What we were surprised by was how remarkable the British community absorbed it, and it was insatiable.
Well, and to me, what's surprising is how underestimated the vegan market had been. So how this enormous store chain, et cetera, could not know its own consumers' demand that was lurking right below. And so I think if all grocery stores went that way, or large scale stores went that way, they would see such an uptick in business. Of course, it goes without saying you need a great product, and you want it to be about the experience and not the philosophical conversation of what's in it. But it's all there. It's more money on the table for those companies.
I'm probably giving away too many secrets, but the night before the launch of the Wicked Kitchen line, I was with Derek and Chad. We're in London, and Chad just turns to me and he says, Tesco has no idea what's coming tomorrow. Yes. And they sold out by 11 a.m. They sold out of everything that they had produced. They are under contract to buy 1 ton of mushrooms a week. By noon, they were ordering 5 tons of mushrooms a week. They have now expanded, I think, to 80 SKUs, 73 SKUs they're at right now, from an original 18. It's just been a remarkable success story. So it shows you how supermarkets, which are in the business of selling food, they shouldn't care what consumers are buying. If consumers are asking something, they should give it to them. So there shouldn't be a philosophical debate around that. If they can bring those consumers in and make them happy, they'll become loyal. I was speaking recently, and I started the conversation. I felt like I was going to be challenged. It was. I won't say it was a hostile group, but let's say it was a speaking in an event that might have had a bias. And I said, if I stood up here today and I said, I just had a heart attack, so I'm plant-based because I don't want, for health reasons, you wouldn't care. If I told you I was religious and I won't eat shellfish because I'm Jewish, or I'm allergic to dairy because I'm lactose intolerant, nobody would blink an eye. They wouldn't even ask you another question. But if you said, I'm an ethical vegan because I love animals, or I'm an ethical vegan because I want to protect the environment, all of a sudden it becomes such a big deal. Mm-hmm. When in fact, we all have different reasons why we eat certain foods. So ultimately we want to remove that ridiculous conversation of, why it is we shouldn't eat animals, and just say, I eat this because it's delicious. Now it has to be delicious. And ultimately that's what we want to make sure we're focusing on is it delicious? The other thing I'd like to just make sure I make clear, we are all as human beings on a continuum. I didn't become vegan until I was 33. And prior to meeting my beloved and much, much kinder wife than me, I would argue I was on the wrong side of history across the board. I mean, things that I grew up with, I just don't agree with today. So we all deserve the time to evolve, to see the light, to see a better way, to see a path. My belief is, and I'd probably slit my wrist if I didn't feel this was true. If you give people equal things, one of which is good for humanity and one is bad, and they are truly equal, they're going to choose the one that's better for humanity. And I think I would pray that human beings have that in them, that if they can eat something that is less suffering, that they would choose that. But they're not, that what they're willing to give up, that's tough, and some people won't go very far and some people will go to great lengths.
Well, then I've got great news for you, because Impossible Foods has done many blind studies where they say they give people 2 burgers and they say one is from plants and one is from meat. And as long as it is the same on taste, hands down, even at a higher price, people pick plant-based. So they've done many studies on that. So there is hope for humanity. There is. I will send you those studies from Rachel Conrad of Impossible Foods, who is so wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about Good Catch. So Good Catch being Chad of Derek and Chad, with this wonderful brother team. Derek, as you say, turning London around, or UK around with Tesco. And now London is the leading vegan city in the world. But I take Good Catch on every hike I go because it's in this pouch. It's super convenient. We've been talking about how you got to make things not just taste great, but be really easy and convenient for people so that the experience is just super fast. All that protein on my hike. It's just wonderful. I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your sort of famous relationship, I'll say, with the folks at Good Catch and where you see seafood going.
Sure. So Good Catch was founded because we couldn't find a seafood company that was doing what we wanted to do. It didn't really exist. The plant-based seafood industry is still by all measures, it's non-existent, no rounding error. So we decided to start from scratch. We wanted to focus on finned fish. We went after tuna fish. We didn't think we would get something as good as we did as quickly as we did. The pouched product is our least exciting product. Our frozen line's about to launch. But what was unique about it is that there aren't that many things that you can eat out of a bag that are vegan, a good clean protein that doesn't require preparation. You can have jerky and probably peanuts. I mean, it's really pretty minimal. Mm-hmm. So we wanted something where I could be flying over the Atlantic in coach class, tear open a bag and stick it on a salad and look at that. I've got a meal and I'm happy.
And everybody will hate you. They'll say that guy in 7B, he's got Good Catch. How much did he pay to get on this flight?
I'll tell you what, if you did that with real tuna fish, the plane would empty out. They'd have to do an emergency landing. It smells so bad. The nice thing is that it doesn't smell bad. But it was actually the convenience of that was pretty critical to me. I wanted something that we could eat on the fly, good and clean. And it's just round one. We've got a lot more to do, and it's exciting to see what we can do with seafood. Again, we eat between 200 and 300 different types of sea creatures. The innovations that we can do in that space are remarkable. We've only gotten one fish that we're working on right now. It's going to be a fun ride. We built the company on really a three-legged stool, which had to do with perpetual innovation, mass scale production, and then building a really good brand around awareness. And ultimately, those three things, when they're in full swing and revving up, you can innovate very quickly and bring products to market. We just commissioned our plant in Ohio last week. And I can't believe after all this time in investment, I couldn't be there for it, but there was tears in my eyes. We had one of our colleagues sent a picture of the very first box of our frozen line. And I was with my wife, and we were walking in the woods, and I just thought, wow, we finally did it. That is now going to be a motor that gets put into motion. I think it's noteworthy to consider that, it took Beyond Meat a decade to leave the United States. It took Daya a decade to leave the United States. Gardein almost a decade. We don't have decades. I'm 63. I don't want to be 63, and we're now just going to the UK. So we've. I'll either be heralded or vilified for this, but we spent some pretty risky money on building Good Catch. But the least risky thing we did was build our plant. That plant can produce an enormous amount of plant-based proteins, and it does not have to be just seafood. It can make lots of proteins. So ultimately, we're really excited about it. We're mostly excited about what's to come. I think in a year from now, you're going to see some really remarkable things coming out of it, and it's going to come from the R&D side. That's where things are going to be exciting. So.
Well, it's funny because in the beginning I said that I was dipping my toe into investing, and this is actually where I'd like to invest. I'd like to invest in the area that is problem area for getting out more food, which is scaling up. So I'd like to be investing in the factories themselves, the plants that make it, they make it for one company or several, as you say. Yeah. So I will follow up with you after class.
Yeah, so there is an enormous amount of money around for infrastructure, because infrastructure is hard assets. It's you can go and kick tires. It's not super. It's not flashy, right? But what it will do is it'll be infrastructure and production is what will change the world. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of really good stories and comments on Yelp. What you really want is you want comments on Yelp about Good Catch on every corner of the globe. And ultimately, we're looking at proteins that do span the globe. I think it's also really noteworthy that I've got lots of theses and mantras, so I'm just going to keep pushing them out there.
Let's go.
One that I keep focusing on is global adoption comes through local acceptance. And local acceptance is local form, flavor, and function. So I don't want to tell a Brit how to eat his or her tuna fish. They want to put corn in it, go for it. In Asia, if they want it spicy, they want it sweet, go for it. Ultimately, the difference between a British sausage and a German sausage is massive. They're hardly even comparable. So to think that we can just take our base product and put it anywhere, I think would be a disservice to local communities. So ultimately what we want is a highly adaptable protein that can be manipulated and formed to whatever the local markets want. And that's what we're really focusing on with Good Catches. How do we make a one-for-one protein that's seafood that can then be adapted to local markets? And that's what's most exciting for us.
So this reminds me of a conversation that I had with Chuck Muth of Beyond Meat here on this show. And he was saying the exact same thing as we go into China, which I want to talk to you about right now. As we go into China in Starbucks, which is a completely different Starbucks experience than it is here in the United States. It's more like a sit-down dinner thing. We're not there to tell them how to eat their food. We are there to make Beyond Meat in a way that works for them, as is Omnipork, a company that I love, David Young, who's also been on this show. So let's talk about the next step, being China and different tastes around the world. You have a relationship now. You've invested in Dow Foods. Tell me about that. I am so very excited about China's, seemingly from where I sit, fast shift towards plant-based. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm scared to death of China because I don't even know what to do with China. the opportunity there is so massive. I mean, having people like Sebastiano as an example, he's someone who understands those markets. We've got people at New Crop who understand the markets. We're going to put a toe in there, but it's really the individual companies that need a strategy of what they're going to do with it. We did make one investment in there in a company called Starfield. Starfield makes a base protein. It's plant-based. There will be companies that will couple that with non-vegan items, but Starfield is a vegan company. In the same way that Beyond Meat has its Dunkin' breakfast sandwich, we can't prescribe what other companies are going to add to our proteins, but we can sure as heck make a really good base protein that at least takes that part out of the equation. China is going to be a remarkable ride, because when China decides to do something,
they do it.
It's done. And they put plant-based proteins into their 5-year plan. All right. I think they did that just this year. I don't even know that that's announced yet. And that is it's like the equivalent of our farm bill. You can look at the correlation between pork production in China and diabetes. It's nearly perfectly correlated. This is not something that's solely about personal choice. It's about, do you even have the capacity to take that many people and put them on a dialysis machine or deal with, I mean, it's massive. So the healthcare issue is a big part. Obviously there's environmental. And then of course there's things like illnesses and we're seeing that play out.
I would add to that, there's the trade issue. Very hard to have a strong stance in trade, particularly if you're dealing with someone who's irrational and orange. Very hard to have a hard stance in trade if they're controlling your food supply. So you want to get a handle on that and fast.
That's right. I think, so for New Crop, we invested with the Dow team to help us understand how we can be more effective in Asia. The good news is they're very receptive. They're a receptive audience. They work very quickly. Scaling there, you need somebody on the ground to do that. And so ultimately, even Good Catch, we are working on a plan for Asia and China specifically this year. And the plan is to enter it cautiously, but with vigor. And so we want it to be well thought out. It's not a place that you enter gently. Same thing with Brazil, same thing with India. You can't just go willy-nilly in there and think that you're going to execute well. There's multinational companies that have failed miserably. To think that we can do it without help would be a fool's errand. Sure.
But there does seem to be a lot of focus right now on China with, Beyond Meat going in and you guys going in and India as well. I think it's the Evo company that is doing a plant-based egg, and there's Green Dot, as you were investing in them before. So there's just seems to be a lot in this area of the world that already has such a history of veganism or at least vegetarianism. So it seems that there's not going to be that too much resistance to it. So as the world falls, I think that part of the world is going to fall even faster.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The consumers may not resist it. There is a learning curve. Asia, Southeast Asia, China, they are behind. They're about maybe a decade behind, but they've been eating plant-based proteins for millennia. So it's no surprise to them that this is on the menu. They have no fear of soy or anything like that.
Sure.
China is the largest producer of non-GMO soy on the planet. Their ability to, their innovation is coming along. I think what we can do, the US is the best in innovation. Europe is the best in consumer adoption right now. And Europe is coming along in innovation as well. China will likely jump over both of those when they so decide. And the question is, who's going to make that decision? Who can influence that? Or what can influence that? And a pandemic can have quite an influence on that. And so I have a feeling we're going to see some policy changes that only a country like China can implement. And that's production. It's production, distribution, and supply chain. And all of those things need to grow together. So it's going to be remarkable.
I think these are very interesting times. I agree with you. I think that China is going to leap over both of those because if you are looking at some sort of world position that you would like to hold politically, it's a race for food. And meat and dairy is not sustainable. It's not a business model. It loses money. You have to subsidize it. It's susceptible to pandemics. Lose, 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 lose. So the first one to really conquer plant-based has a lot of power.
Yeah, my wife uses a term called the exploitation of desperation, and we try to point that to people all the time. If you're either exploiting an animal, you're exploiting its will to die with less pain. If it's a human being, to take workers, pay them little wage, and shove them into a slaughter factory, that's exploitation of desperation. And our economy really runs on that. Any commodity product where they've exacted every possible resource that they could to create a bottom line, the last thing that they do is human beings, and they do it by desperation. That has to come to an end. And we're in a unique position in the plant-based meat world, is that we don't need that. We can pay a really good going wage because it's efficient what we do. So we don't need to exploit that over and over and over again. It has to come to an end. So we ultimately, Kirsty runs our DEI program and is head of ESG for Unovis. And she focuses on not just are we helping animals, but who else is in the list? Who else is on the line that we can help and that we can advance and that we can make better? When she decided to take that role, I don't think any of us realized how tough that is. I mean, we've got a system that has been exploiting something, our environment, our water system, our animals, our humans for millennia. It's going to be hard to change. So we need policy that does it. We need innovation, and ultimately we need consumer behavioral change. And right now we're focusing on all three as best we can.
Yes, but it is wonderful to see capitalism on the right side of this one. And it always hasn't been in the past, but it really is here. So you've got that extra boost that the math makes sense to be more humane. And I'll say that for people as well as animals and the environment. So it gives me a little bit of hope. Let me ask you a couple sort of exit questions. If you, going back to maybe the beginning of our conversation, just to help the entrepreneur who's watching here or who will watch. And I'll also say, if anybody has missed this conversation or you're coming in just now, you can always get this by subscribing to the Plant-Based Business Hour on podcasts, iTunes, etc. It's everywhere. So if you are giving an entrepreneur some tips on what they need to put in their deck and how that deck needs to flow, could you do that, please?
Well, know your audience, first of all. I look at decks on occasion where the first 7 or 10 pages might be trying to convince me that veganism is relevant. I go right over those because I already know. So don't spend a lot of time on the backstory when I already know it. What I want to know is what's novel. Why are you coming to me specifically? Now, New Crop is very specific. We're laser focused. So we make it clear, don't come to us with decadence. Don't come to us with a beverage. We just don't do that. We are experts in what we do and we want to stay in our lane. So just make sure you're tailoring it to the audience. There's really no one deck. You want to have several decks depending on who you're going to. So first of all, make sure your deck is tailored. And then you want to know a couple things that I look for. What is your entry plan? And then what is your product migration plan? So one product is not a company. It just isn't. One product is one product. You want to know what is it that you're making that you can build a story and a platform around. And so you can't just come to me and say, I've just invented the best vegan fish stick in the world, because I think, great, that's a good product. What else do you got? I want to know where you're going. And so ultimately looking at what the long-term play is. And then I want to know why you want my money, or why you want any money in the first place. How are you going to spend it? And most importantly, what is this money going to get you to that's a de-risking event for the next round of funding? If in the middle of your deployment of the money that I invested, if you're going to go to market in a year from now and you can't tell me why the company is more value than it was a year before, don't expect an uptick in valuation. You haven't earned it. So I want to know when you raise that money that there's at least some assurance that over time, this investment has de-risked it. It's made it more appealing. And in doing so, the valuation will go up. Your ability to raise capital comes in. I don't want to fund a bridge to nowhere, as you know. And so I want to know, how do I get in? How do I get out? And what's your funding plan? And by the way, the final thing is, I also know that you don't know. I've never seen a business plan. I actually have the original Beyond Meat business plan. People look at me. I've got quite a few of those, and I keep them just for posterity's sake, but I'll never show them.
Well, I'll say all the decks that I see, and I haven't seen very many yet, just maybe 15 or so. No one has an exit strategy, and nobody really has numbers about sales or any understanding of how they got to the valuation, except maybe through some darts.
Yeah.
So
I found my original investment memo for Beyond Meat for the Humane Society, because that's where I got started, and running their mission related investment portfolio. And right in the very first line, I talk about exit, and I say flat out, an IPO will not happen. This is most likely going to be an acquisition by a major conglomerate. And I was proven wrong very, very happily. So you never know how these are
the only one. Yes. So, would be unfair to leave out investors. So if we're giving tips to entrepreneurs, I'm wondering if you could give tips to investors. When I look, again, I want to throw up this JPEG. When I look at all the brands that you've been in, some of them are food companies, some are butter, some are cheese, some are meat, some are even delivery services like Purple Carrot, which you've now exited. Yep. So I'm wondering if you can tell people, do you suggest that they target, that they stay laser focused, that they diversify? How do you tell people to put together a portfolio?
I want people to be targeted but agile, I guess is what I look for. I don't want a major pivot. Seeing a major pivot is not a good sign, but moving your way down a path forward is smart. And you don't know what you don't know. When we started Good Catch, we thought, hey, no problem. Let's call up a co-manufacturer. They'll make the product for us and we'll be off to the races. 3 years later, we're finishing a $42,000 or 42,000 square foot plant in Ohio. I didn't ever expect that. You just don't know. And so I would encourage investors, well, this is what you should do in life, period. Above all, be kind, first of all. These are people you want to be friends with. You're going to be in business with them for a long time. Don't beat them up. Be nice to them. They're on your side. You are both sitting on the same side of the table. You're not negotiating once this is done. So keep in mind that this is a relationship that could last decades in some cases. I'm on the board of a company that I helped get started back in 1994. You just never know. And so ultimately, be kind to your founders. They're all humans, and they're struggling, and there's a lot of stress related to it. Yeah. So be empathetic about that stress. Help them. Don't constantly charge at them. And in doing so, you'll end up being really good friends, and you'll be comrades in arms, and you'll end up winning the war together. So so that's great advice, I would say to that. Just kind of riffing off my original question, though, when I look at decks, I'll get one about cheese and one about ice cream and one about meat, and I'll say, like, gosh, I don't truly know anything about the cheese market. It's not that I can't do research, but I sometimes wonder, should I do 6 cheese companies and just hope that one of them does really well? Hope is the wrong word. Hopefully, you do your numbers and stuff, but you don't really know what's going to hit. Or is it better to be diversified? I wondered if you had a concrete version of that answer. I'm not as good at what I do as people think that I am. The fact is, New Crop has been successful because we're diversified. Okay. First of all, you don't need to know the size of the cheese market. You just need to know that it's huge. So nobody needs to tell me how big the cheese market is. I look at decks, every day, and the first thing they'll tell me is how big the meat market is. I'm like, I don't care. It's totally fine that we're only going to take a small slice of it. So I think you're right. What's beautiful about cheese, all cheeses can win. We are in a very unique position in that all boats are rising. Miyoko's can be successful alongside Day, alongside Numu, alongside Violife. They all can be successful because the consumers are asking for it. So that shift is happening, and everybody gets to win. Right in the middle of Cargill and Tyson is probably a dozen other meat companies that are $1 billion brands. Right. So this idea that there's only going to be one winner. I got asked recently, what makes you think that Good Catch is going to win this game? And I thought, good Lord, I hope it's not just us. We need a lot more of us. We're too small. There's just room for everybody. I do recommend diversification if you can do it. It's very hard to make small investments wisely. It's not something that a novice can do easily. It's not stock picking. Some of these investments can take literally decades to get out of. So you really got to think of this as playing the long game. Back the entrepreneur that you think can get funding, that is charismatic, that is innovative. I wish I had some formula. I don't. What we do have is a bunch of entrepreneurs who work in our team that are fearless about being an entrepreneur. And so when we look at companies, we look at it with an entrepreneurial bent. I have a degree in entrepreneurialism. 3 of our staff went to Babson under the entrepreneurial program. We're fearless around what it takes to be in the startup mode. And ultimately, what we want to know is this a team that we can work with, that we can mold, that we can bring along until somebody smarter than us steps in and helps them to the next leg. And the sooner that happens, the better. Miyoko's is a great example of that. I love Miyoko. We led the investment in her through the Humane Society back when I was there. And there came a time when they got a new venture firm came in, and they were really good at CPG. And I just thought, boy, these are smarter people than me. It's time for me to step back. And I did. And it was remarkable. And Miyoko was great about it. She built a factory. She did everything really remarkably. And it was perfect for me because my work was done. And I did the same thing with Day and Beyond and others. Like I shouldn't say I did anything for those companies. I'm like Forrest Gump. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. The work that they did, I just helped a little bit where I could and got out of the way when the time was right. And that's still what I do today.
Well, I love Miyoko's because, she always says that she's a mission with a company rather than a company with a mission. So she really is set on changing the world and getting the world to ditch dairy, which is great for everyone's health and the environment. And of course, the animals, dairy being one of the cruelest sectors that there is. Okay. A couple more quick questions while I've still got you. So what's the product that you would like to see on the market that isn't yet there? What are you not seeing that you want to see?
Well, I'm working on it right now. Numu is making a pizza grade mozzarella in the way that all coffee shops on the planet now have soy milk. Pizza is not there yet. And so pizza, which is consumed globally, should have that same be afforded that same opportunity. So that's what I want. I'm a comfort food junkie. I grew up in Philadelphia. I love vegan cheesesteaks and at that time cheesesteaks. I ate everything that I shouldn't eat. I want those things back. And so I'm looking for the comfort stuff. And I helped Daya because I literally wanted a grilled cheese sandwich that melted. I'm helping Numu because I want pizza. Period. And that's a big one for me.
It's so funny. I've heard so many investors say the same thing. Like, I want to feed my stomach first. I want to like it. I want to eat it. It's all about me and what's going in my fridge. Then they'll invest. I'm going to send you, because I'm from Chicago, I'm going to send you a deep dish Chicago style vegan pizza. You didn't think it was possible. I'm talking about the deep dish that's like 2 inches thick. It's so good. Do you want, because I got to take orders now. Do you want it just the cheese version? Do you want the veggie version? Or do you want the mock meat, sausage, pepperoni, the whole thing?
Meat lovers.
You want the meat lover? I'm sending this to you, Chris. Okay, meat lovers, you're going to love this Kitchen 17. You are getting your pizza, my friend.
I love it.
Okay, a couple more quick questions, and I swear I will let you go at some point. You're a wealth of knowledge, so thank you for being with me today. What are your predictions for the future? So, of course, we all know it's going plant-based, but let's hone it in a little bit and be a little bit more specific. Between the next 3 to 5 years, where is plant-based going?
Well, I think we're going to see... boy, I hope nobody's recording this because I'm going to get it wrong.
I am.
What I think we're going to see is more strategic showing up, and they're going to open up their R&D and help improve products. Now, the question is whether or not they see it as competitive or whether they see it as collaborative.
You're talking about meat and dairy doing this.
I got meat and dairy, yeah. And so what I suspect, what we don't have right now, and what I think we'll have in 3 to 5 years, there's been very little M&A activity because the companies aren't big enough. And the one that was big enough just did an IPO. So that kind of takes that one off the table. But most of them aren't ready.
And the other one isn't interested.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so I think in 3 to 5 years, you'll start seeing some companies that will be acquired. And in that acquisition, you'll see a footprint that will get much bigger very quickly. So when Greenleaf bought Light Life and Field Roast, neither of them were in Canada, at least not very much. They put them into Canada almost overnight because of Maple Leaf's connections. So that created a whole new product line, a whole new culinary experience for a bunch of Canadians that otherwise hadn't been able to experience that. As this M&A starts happening, the way that M&A gets its value is to take something and extrapolate it inside an existing system. And what I'm hoping is that we'll start seeing that accelerate. And that's going to be everybody wins. Everybody wins. The acquirers win, the consumers win, animals win, the environment wins. Most of these companies aren't there yet. We've got a new class of companies that are kind of coming into their own, but they really need to get to maybe $20 to $30 million in revenues before they're all that exciting to look at. And most of them aren't there yet. So another 3 to 4 years, they should be. And then you should start seeing an acceleration of convenience and availability. And to me, that will be an exciting time. Maybe I'll retire when that happens, but.
Well, what I love about this, and I think it goes hand in hand with what you're saying, when Maple Leaf bought Light Life and Field Roast, I've interviewed Dan Curtin, CEO of Greenleaf Foods, which has Light Life and Field Roast under the umbrella, and he was on this show. They, in 2020, might be a little bit delayed now because of coronavirus, are opening a plant right in the heart of animal agriculture. It's going to be the largest, well, perhaps prior to Good Catch's factory, but initially, it was intended to be the largest plant-based factory in North America with 420 jobs.
It's still going to be bigger than ours. But,
okay.
It's in Indiana. So Greenleaf is an investor in Good Catch, and we want to collaborate with them. I mean, they're similar that these are legacy brands that they bought.
Yes.
But the brand can still be exploited in a good way. It can be leveraged in a very good way. And so the idea that they could bring a chicken to market or improve sausage or anything, that innovation has to continue. And so ultimately this investment for them, I think they'll get some efficiency out of it. But I think you're going to see innovation that, again, I'm trying to make it so that my stomach wins at the end of this. And I think that it's gonna, based on the innovation that comes from that. What would be really, really unfortunate is when companies get sold through an M&A process and the R&D gets killed off. And that just can't happen. We have to keep these innovation, the R&D operations in check. They have to stay functioning. This idea that we're somehow done, that any company is done with improving a product is not true. But it has happened. I'm not going to tell you which company, but a bunch of them work for us now because when they were sold, they lopped off the R&D team right away because they were looking for accretive value in the bottom line, and R&D doesn't bring short-term value, it brings long-term value. So we want to make sure that R&D stays in place. And in an M&A scenario where you're just trying to exploit your current library of products, R&D is tough to justify. So it would be very unfortunate to see that happen.
Yeah, and very short-sighted, as you say. What I was going to say about that plant is that plant brings 420 jobs. And if you imagine that there are 4 people for every household, you're talking about 1,800 people who are dependent on a plant-based paycheck. And when people are getting their paychecks from plant-based items, you watch how consumerism shifts. So I think as you see more and more jobs created, and I think there will be more jobs created through plant-based expansion, you're going to see consumers shift as well. So I'm very excited to see job creation. That's what I want to see in the next 3 to 5 years, plant-based job creation.
COVID hit and we were still in hiring mode. It was important for us to keep our factory. We were deemed to be, what was the word they used? I'm losing it, but critical. And so we were able to kind of keep our factory going. We actually hired more people in 2 months. And importantly, the global center of the plant-based seafood industry is in the middle of a cornfield in Ohio. We're making seafood and there's no water anywhere in sight. It's a remarkable thing. And the talent around there, particularly in Ohio, it's already a food hub, is remarkable. To have those people coming in and helping us with what they know, it's heartwarming.
I think that's a game changer. I really do. I think that kind of one-on-one, I know it seems like a slow way to go, but that kind of one-on-one connection to help huge used to be animal agriculture hubs to see the value in plant-based, I think is really a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay, so this is a bit of a philosophical question. You've been vegan for a while now, but beyond the vegan question, what do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Oh, well, I wish I knew the Beyond Burger was coming.
And beyond the IPO.
So 10 years ago, well, first of all, when I went to work for the Humane Society, I looked at all the ways that animals were being abused, and I thought, good Lord, everywhere I turn, it's happening. There's an economic opportunity in all of these to shift that.
Yeah.
What I learned from that is you cannot be an expert in all of these industries. I mean, that's media, film, animal testing, drugs. I couldn't be an expert in that. So going to New Crop and Bruce Friedrich was really good about getting me laser focused on one thing. How do we address this one thing? And that laser focus allowed me to get rid of all of the distractions and say, this is what I'm going to get good at. I wish I'd known that 10 years ago. So that I didn't waste a lot of time on things that ultimately may have not been helpful to advance the cause. That's number one. Two, the realization around price awareness, convenience, taste helped me solidify our investment strategy and thesis. And so when we look at any company, we look at those four things. And in any of those companies, they may have one or two, but they're missing three or another one or two. And so what we wanted to know was, well, how do we address those weaknesses? And ultimately understanding that dynamic, which is, part philosophical, part human behavior, part mechanical and financial, understanding how we could leverage those was really critical, and also brought some sanity to me because I could put things in an order that allowed me to think more strategically. And I think that I really learned that over the last 5 years. I think it's helped my team rally around a strategy as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say that. It's a lesson that I'm constantly reteaching myself because I seem to learn it and forget it because I get so passionate about things. That's where we started our conversation in the beginning. You see entrepreneurs so passionate about the product and that, maybe they're trying to be all things to all people or what have you. But the more you focus, the more things come into focus. Mm-hmm. So I must remind myself all the time. Thank you for that reminder. Stay focused in what you do to have the most impact. Yep. That's really to have the most impact. Well, my very last question for you, unless there's more that you want to throw at us, because we are here to stay as long as you can stay. But my very last question for you, and by the way, everybody, he's been standing. Chris has been standing at his computer the whole time. So you're in great shape, Chris. Good for you. Okay, you're busy. You're running around like you always are. What is your go-to snack?
Oh, that changes every day. My wife will make something for me and surprise me. And literally, she can corroborate this. Literally, tears will start coming to my eyes. I get so excited about food. Also, it's such a heartwarming, a good food experience brings up so much emotion. So on any given day, I might think that I'm going to have something, and she'll surprise me, and I love it. I love anything that's comfort. So in a perfect world, there's a chef. We have our Hall of Fame of chefs, but one of my favorite is Rich Landau out of Veg Grill. Mm-hmm. He makes a Philly cheesesteak that is the best thing I've ever eaten. It's the best thing I've ever eaten. I would eat, when I go there, I buy 10 at a time and I freeze them, and all I eat is cheesesteaks for a week. So that anything that's comfort, I love. But the fact is, I love food. I love food. It doesn't have to be anything monumental. Seedless watermelon is one of my favorite things on the planet. I'd eat that every day if I could. So, but I don't have any particular one thing other than it needs to be comforting.
And do you do any cooking yourself?
I can boil water really well.
That well, huh? You're that great of a chef.
You know what I can do? I am really good at making sandwiches. I am known as the sandwich guy, and people joke about it all the time, but I love sandwiches. And so it's very traditional. Sometimes I'll do stuff that's fun. I can make pasta dishes and stuff like that, but my wife is so much better than me that the other day we harvested our 3 spears of asparagus, and I steamed them and I dressed them and I put a little capers on there and I presented it to Kirsty and I think she liked it. But that made me feel really good that I was able to do something that wasn't just making another sandwich. If Kirsty were to go away for a week, I'd eat nothing but sandwiches. So.
Okay, well, you're going to broaden your horizons with those 3 asparagus spears.
Exactly, yeah.
Chris Kerr, I want to thank you for doing all that you do. Thank you for being a visionary, for seeing how we can change the world through commerce and products and giving people great food that brings on these wonderful experiences and is comforting for people and animals and the planet and getting us to that point of longevity as a planet so we don't implode, which if we don't change fast, folks, it's kind of any day now. And coronavirus, I think, has proven that. So I do want to thank you, Chris, for being with me. I do hope that you'll come back because believe it or not, as much as we talked about things today, we didn't really get into things like fermentation. I think that's very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Cellular agriculture, 3D printing, more of what's going to happen in the contract manufacturing space. None of these things are as sexy as Beyond Meat, but they're worthy of a good conversation. So I hope you'll come back.
Love to. I'm only as good as the people around me. We just work with so many remarkable people that all have the same agenda. It is a remarkable place to be. We won't violate the values of those that back us. And I'm sure that the listeners to your show are people that I would identify with well. So thank you for giving me this time to chat, and you can have me back anytime.
I would love it. Everybody, we are going to leave. Chris, you stay put because I got to send you pizza, so you don't go away. But to everybody else, thanks for all you do, folks. Thanks for listening. Please share this. Together, we're taking back our health and the health of the planet. Bye, everybody. I'll be back here on Tuesday at 1 p.m. for the Plant-Based Business Hour.